E7-6 is a verbal question. Briefly discuss each of the following short case studies. So,
Holy moly.
I don't know that I want to read through all these because you'll probably have different discussions than I, or different ways of saying it.
But that's what you gotta say.
The governing board of a city recently levied a gas. So it says, briefly discuss each of the following short case studies. Provide explanation for your analysis. The governing board of a city recently levied a gasoline tax for the express purpose of financing the construction and operation of a civic center, servicing debt issued for construction and related capital outlay, or any combination of the three. The board instructed the comptroller to establish a gasoline tax fund to account for the receipt, expenditure, and balances of the tax proceeds. What type of fund or funds should be established? What would you say?
Wouldn't that be special projects fund?
Special revenue.
Capital projects,
Oh, capital project.
right? So you could do a capital projects fund. You wouldn't necessarily have to do a special revenue fund, although you could, right? That would just involve other transfers. But since all of the revenue is around the capital projects, you could just do the capital projects, right? Because the special assessment piece, right? And what is it? There's a bond or a note or something, right? Servicing debt issued for construction, right? You might add a debt service fund as well, because you're servicing that debt. It doesn't tell us, what it doesn't tell us is it doesn't tell us if that debt is long-term debt or short-term debt. And that would make a difference, or could make a difference, in whether we use a debt service fund in addition to our capital outlay fund, or capital project fund. Okay? So you would at least open a capital project fund. You could open a debt service fund. You could open a special revenue fund, but you probably wouldn't. Okay? B, what problems might one encounter in attempting to determine the proper disposition of a capital projects fund balance remaining after the project has been completed and all capital projects fund liabilities have been paid? What issues might you run into? So a capital projects fund is a fund that's been set aside for a specific capital project, right?
Yes.
So let's say at the end of the project you have money left over. Who gets the money? And how do you decide?
If you only have one capital projects fund, then you can't decide. Or is the problem saying that there are, like,
No, it's
several?
you only have one capital project
I have
fund.
one capital project fund.
But who gets that money?
I would
Right.
think it would depend on if it was based on like what project needed it next, essentially. Is there
Okay,
is
could
there
be.
priority? You
Could
know?
be.
Is there a failing road that needs to be fixed?
It could be. What would you, so remember this is in the context of government, right? And law, and things have been set aside for specific purposes. If you were going to use money from one capital project to fund another capital project, you might have to get approval from the voters to do that, right?
To switch where
You're
the
probably
money's
not
going.
going to get happy. You're probably not going to be happy as a taxpayer, or maybe you don't care, if you pay taxes for a school and they build a casino, right? I mean, maybe that's fine with you. Maybe it's not, right? But in the jurisdiction of the government, you have to have some approval. So that could be one issue. You could have another project, right? But the issue would be you need to go get voter approval for that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, okay, so you have money left over, if it came out like the general vendor, that shouldn't have to go right back to, then you don't have to do all the red tape of, you return to the general fund, you have it in the capital project, pull it from there, you're good to go, you don't have to.
Yeah, you could send it back to the general fund. If, as in the first problem in chapter 7 that we did, right, some money came from 3 sources, right? Where did it come from? It came from some came from the general fund, some came from a grant, some came from a bank, right? So if, let's say that that's the capital project, there was some money left over, how did we know where to return it? what's due first, part of it was mandated, right? The grant said you have to return this portion back to the state. So is there a mandate on the money, right? Could we change it by voter approval, like you guys said first? Does it belong back, should it be paid back to a debt, right? If we took a debt out to build this thing, and we didn't use all the money, it kind of makes sense to put that money back toward the debt, right, to pay the debt that you took out. So any combination of those things, right, any other reasoning is fine. Your book, as I recall, says, you know, it depends on a couple of things. What are the legal stipulations, right, that have to go into that? Are there any, again, grants, you know, that have requirements on returning money, things like that. Okay? C. The government has been awarded a grant to finance a major general government capital project. At year end, the government has not met the eligibility requirements for the $2 million capital grant, nor has it received any cash. How is the grant reported by the government? It's not. And it says that in your chapter. If they've been awarded the grant, but they haven't earned it and they haven't received it, it is neither available nor usable, so they don't report it. It does say that you can report it in your notes, but just like in financial accounting, if it's not a reliable entry, right, if it doesn't have a monetary piece to it, you don't put it on your statements. You don't record it in your general ledger, right? So technically nothing has happened. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe? 9:10, are we fading fast? Okay. Letter D. What are special assessments? What is unique about them, and how do they affect the capital projects fund? That's in the first part of your chapter. We talked a little bit about that. You can go back and review that.
You
Okay?
know what they are, and they get your name in the newspaper.
There you go. You get your name in
Is
the
that the appropriate answer, Homer?
No.
Get your name in the paper. Via examples.
They are a way to get your name in the paper. But that is in the first part of your chapter, so.